looking back, what was the biggest lesson learned from the whole experience from contract to close to actually coming full cycle?
Yeah, I mean, if there was one lesson, it's probably think a little bigger than you probably are right now, because I took a ton of time to do, research and stuff like that. I probably do a couple of years maybe of prep, but don't do 20 years like I did.
I think for me, it was not everything has to be perfect.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. So, you go in thinking, okay, I'm going to make sure I do this, this, and that. And it changes, day one. So just be flexible on everything that you're kind of coming across, and just know, if you do it right, if you're putting your mind to it, then it's going to turn out okay.
I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this is a first deal episode where we walk through what it takes for someone to find, fund, and close on their first apartment complex. And if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you are probably trying to do exactly the same thing. So before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and the little notification bell to make sure you get notified every single time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Streamline Capital Group. And I'm here today with two guys that I've been friends with for a while, Matanza Capital Partners. We got Mike Messner and Nick Haraden on the line with us today. So guys, how's it going?
Doing all right, doing great.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. And, we were talking about, appearances, and, both of you guys have been on the show a couple of times before. This is actually kind of fun for me because I think you guys first came on as aspiring investors. We did a first deal episode together. And then Mike, you came on as an experienced investor, and we're going to do what we're calling a full cycle deal case study. Perfect. That's what we're going to do today. So we're going to talk about a deal that they took full cycle and just recently sold. So before we get into the deal, let's talk about you guys first. Flip a coin, and one of you guys can introduce yourselves first, and then we'll flip-flop from there.
Go for it, Nick.
Okay. Yeah. So Nick Haraden, we've met Brian a while back, and he's certainly helped us through a lot of the real estate struggles that we've had at the beginning, and the advice along the way. But my family's been in real estate for a long time with development and just real estate agents. My background before real estate was in hospitality and contract government work, stuff like that. So, I felt that having that hospitality background was really important actually for getting into real estate, because it is a people business.
Yep. And
you kind of never stop having to, make sure your tenants are being treated the right way, and you have the right place for them to live.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty rewarding at the end of the day when you actually can take a deal full cycle, and you have people that want to move into apartments. It's pretty awesome to leave a apartment building in better hands and better, it's gone a long ways from the beginning. So that's kind of my background. I started my portfolio in St. Louis, which is where we found our first deal, and deals after that. And I had a great team on the ground, and Michael and I met. I'm sure he'll get into a little bit more details, but we met on a common Facebook group. And we both had a passion for real estate, which is really, I think, one of the most important things you can have in this business, especially if you're taking on investors. You got to love what you do. We both love real estate. We just wanted to grow faster and grow a little bit bigger. And we kind of both just took our talents and took it kind of to the next level. And the deal that we're going to talk about was the first deal that we found. And it was a fantastic deal. And we had a lot of great investors on it that rolled into further deals with us. So I'll let Michael take it from his side, but yeah, it's been a great partnership so far.
Perfect.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. My family is in real estate as well, specifically on the architecture side. My dad was an architect. My brother is an architect in Chicago and an architecture professor. I kind of ventured into, the tech side and the business side more, and then kind of found my way back into real estate eventually. Moved to California back in 2008 to work in tech. And yeah, like our I was working for various startups that had flexible policies, a lot of, remote work and things like that. Eventually, one of our offices went totally remote. This was pre-COVID. And I suddenly had lots of extra time and decided to pull the trigger on real estate. I'd been talking about it for so long. And yeah, as Nick mentioned, making it sound it's easy. I had a couple of partnerships kind of fizzle before meeting Nick, but it's been great ever since.
Yeah, I think that happens to a lot of people. A lot of people getting into the business or trying out partnerships, and it's like, okay, I don't like him because of this. I don't like her because of that and whatnot. And then you finally find the right person, and it's, game over from there. But
It's like dating, you got to kiss
Yeah.
some frogs before you find the.
absolutely, absolutely. So a lot of people talk about this proverbial law of the first deal. I mean, this was your first property, 24 units. You guys bought it, roughly 2 years ago, if memory serves correctly. Did the law of the first deal work in your case, or was it something different?
I might need to familiarize myself with the law of the first. What is the
Oh,
law of the
yeah,
first
yeah,
deal?
yeah.
The first one doesn't go well, or
It basically says, it takes you a long time to get your first deal, but the second deal, comes a lot faster. That's
oh
the law
yeah.
of the first deal. Yeah. So I guess it's not a universal law if you guys never heard of it.
Well,
I mean,
in
yeah,
some respects, I think so.
yeah, we both had personal portfolios.
Mhm.
So that, I mean, that was certainly the case, backing up a little, like I
Mhm.
bought my first property was a quad in Wisconsin, which is where I am right now. I actually happen to be in Northwoods, Wisconsin right now instead of home in California. And that one, I mean, I don't know. I researched real estate for 20 years before I actually pulled
Mhm.
the trigger, way too
Yeah.
long. And then my next deal was 4 months later or something.
Yeah.
So, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. 20 years to 4 months.
Reading books
That's
and
accelerated.
I
making
think I
excuses.
think after you buy your first deal, it's certainly you start putting the pieces together much faster. Okay,
Yeah.
this is how this works. I got to get lending set up. I got to get boots on the ground set up. You certainly figure stuff out, but
Yeah.
it really depends on your partnership too. I mean, if you have someone that has deal flow and ready to roll, then maybe not so much. But
Yep.
if you're both kind of starting off from zero, then yeah, you're gonna have to find your market. You're gonna have to, figure out what a good deal is in that market, which could take months,
Yeah.
weeks,
Yeah.
hours,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but I
like
mean,
that.
this one took a while, to find the right partnership and stuff too. And now we're working on our fifth, in a couple of years. So like, yeah, it definitely accelerated. Syndications for sure accelerated after our
Awesome.
first.
Awesome. So let's talk briefly, and I mean, we want to focus, and this is more for listeners. Mike, Nick, and I have talked about this already, but talk briefly about getting under contract, closing, and then the focus is going to be after you close, the operations of the deal, and then into the sale and that whole transaction side. So let's start with finding the deal and getting to the closing table.
Yeah, so you're going to love this. We were actually laughing about this before, and we found this on LoopNet, which is people, the common thought is that's where deals go to die, right? And it's garbage that's been picked over a million times, and et cetera, et cetera. But I had underwritten, we were underwriting everything, and we had brokers sending us stuff as well. We hadn't built a huge network that we have now, but we were looking at everything that crossed our path on Crexy, LoopNet, brokers, you name it. And like, if you really know how to underwrite and the right numbers cross your path, like it doesn't matter where you got it, right? So a lot of people don't bother looking even, at LoopNet because they think those are crap deals. But yeah, the numbers, like we were just watching everything, had alerts. This one popped up, and a couple hours later, we were like sending in an LOI.
If you know what you're looking for, right? It goes back to knowing your market. Like for me,
yeah,
I saw these come up, and it was a 24 unit. 12 of the units all had townhomes, personal basements, beautifully redone, and then the other 12 needed some work. They weren't townhomes, but it was in a great location. I mean, I told Michael right when it came on, like, let's reach out. Like we got to jump on this. And I think within the first hour, we were talking to the broker. He was on like vacation right after he listed it, and he's like, "I'll be back tomorrow." I'm like, "No, we want this now. Don't close the phone. Like you're gonna get 10 more calls in the next hour." So
yeah, well, I'll tell you, you say something about where deals go to die. I have actually found that a lot of brokers on certain size deals just automatically put it on LoopNet or automatically put it on Crexy. And it's kind of like, with anything, they want to spend the most time on the big deals that are getting the big paychecks. And a lot of times the smaller deals, like this is a 24 unit that we're talking about. Some brokerages would be like, oh, 24 unit. I think you guys bought it at 1.7-ish.
7, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're looking at the commission. They're just like, yeah, let's just throw this on Crexy. Let's go.
We're good with that because more eyes the better if when we go to sell it, but when we're buying it, we're like, all right, we want to be first.
Yep. So anyway, called the broker on vacation. He comes back. Let's get next steps and get to that closing table.
Yeah, we wrote an LOI. I had like a sort of a template to crank something out real quick. And, you got to do all the pre-work, right? So we had, I think we'll probably talk about the raise later, but like We had over 100 investors already in our database that, we knew we could reach out to. We had, an LOI formatted and written because we knew like it was going to, you're going to need to put it out there right away when you were ready. We had the underwriting structured in such a way that we could do like the 15-minute version that made us confident enough to do an LOI.
Yep.
All the work happens ahead of time. So you're ready to go. Yeah. So, and then LOI, I think that was the one, Nick, where they're like, oh, we don't even read LOIs, like you need to have a contract. And that was
also important note is that, yeah, we had 100 investors, which, people were going to like, how did you have that for your first deal? Well, we met with anybody and everybody before this deal. Like we knew we wanted to do a deal together.
Yeah.
So we were very confident that we were going to find a deal. So the second that we kind of formed our partnership, we were like, all right, let's talk to family and friends. Let's talk to coworkers. Let's talk to people that we met on common Facebook groups. And we met, like we had 100 calls right before we met a deal. Like this is the time to be meeting with people. Right. So
I agree with that. I mean, it's one of those things where it's kind of like a dog chasing the tail type idea where you've got to be prepared to get deals. And if you're not prepared, you're not going to get the deals, So it's one of those where as you keep on going down the process, it's like, you put out an offer, or you call brokers and it's like, oh, I remember thinking LOI, what's that? And okay, Googling LOI. Okay, next time I'll have the LOI ready. Here we go. So yeah, you have to be prepared to get the deals. And I mean, the caveat, the converse to that is you're not going to get a deal until you have that preparation.
I think that's where Michael and I's partnership really came into play too, because Michael knew how to put this all together, right? Like he went through a couple of partnerships, like he mentioned, that didn't really work, but he's gone through the syndication world a little bit before we met. So he had the pieces to be like, okay, this is what we need to get there. And then I had the connections on the ground there and the market, I knew the market. So that was another important factor in our partnership as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think the next thing was DD, right, Mike? I mean, we put it under contract and then we flew out to St. Louis and went through every unit. And we had a great inspector that we got a reference from who has been with us on every deal since then. We got into every single unit, took pictures. We did everything on the due diligence side. Learned a lot along the way, too. I mean, luckily we had an inspector that wanted to teach as well as he went, which was great for us because we learned what to look for, what not to have, all that good stuff.
Yep. So you guys hired an inspector for the due diligence on this one.
Yeah.
For the inspection, I mean, if you count, we did all the document due diligence, and I was going from some guidelines I think we got from like Joe Fairless's book. So we asked for like 25 documents or something like that, and they were like, we have 5 of these.
Yeah.
So you get mom and pop, owners of a less than $2 million property, like you don't know what sort of record keeping they have ever.
And what I've realized on properties that size is you get what you get. And if they don't have it, they're not going to produce it for you. So, you get these mom and pop properties, you get your due diligence, folder, you open it up and it's like, there's 3 things in there,
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what they have.
And that's where going back to just your market too, like you better know your vendors going in, like we met vendors at the property when we were out there for 3 days, like, so call your trash companies, call your lawn keeper people, make sure you have a great PM and get everybody there. I mean, we had a whole team going through every unit. I had my PM go through with it. I had my, grass guy come and meet us there, give us a quote, 3 different quotes, So this is where it's really important to make sure you know your market, know your vendors, and get lots of different bids on everything, and then pick the best that works for you and in your budget.
Perfect. All right. Now talk due diligence. Let's hit capital raise real quick. And I mean, you said you had 100 and something investors in your database. How well did you guys do with that number?
We did really well. I mean, so we started with branding, we started with a website, we started with, the things that a lot of people think come when you're like well underway, but really just start with that. We talked with all of our investors. I mean, we were seeing all sorts of deals, so we know what a typical deal looked like, like, okay, all the IRRs are between 14 and 17%, cash on cash, this, whatever. So we just created sort of okay, if we find a deal that looks like this, and they're all looking very similar, how much would you commit? And some people gave us a number, some people kind of hedged a little and said they'd wait for the webinar. But we wrote everybody down. We created an OM. We, put together a webinar, and then we just really hit it hard, trying to get attendance at the webinar and get that kind of social proof.
Yep.
And I think we already had, we probably had a couple 100K in commits. It was only a 700K raise. It's funny because at the time that number sounded so high.
Yeah, right.
Only a 700K raise, and we probably had 200, so I was like, I remember talking with Nick, I was like, we need to express scarcity, like we already have 200 and the rest is going to go fast, and social proof, like if we get 40 people on this and they know they're competing to put in 500K, like, man, that first webinar, like, heart racing, you can hear like your phone buzzing in the background, and that's like soft commits being filled out on your form online. We had a form for folks to fill out. And I mean, I
talk about a rush, man. Talk about
oh yeah, there's nothing like it.
It's like, finishing a sprint and a race, and finishing first. You're just on, cloud nine. Me and Michael are calling, oh wow, can you believe that it went so well? And we finished the race in 2 hours. I mean, we were done after the webinar. So
nice when it works like that and you're just watching the money come in. I mean, it doesn't always work like that, but gosh, it's sure nice when it does. You're texting. I mean, when I've had raises like that, I mean, it's like you're texting your partners back and forth. It's like, we just got another 100. Hey, another 50, and it's you're doing high fives across the country or across the neighborhood, depending on where you're at. But
it was a really awesome feeling because it was our first one. Like Michael said, we really didn't know about the capital raise was the biggest unknown because Michael knew how to underwrite. I had the connections, we had the right deal. We just didn't know what we can come up with. And, I think it's important to note, I think we'll touch on it later, but just, the money comes from a lot of different places, like places that you would have no idea would have. It was pretty cool. I mean, we met some investors going on the deal 4 and 5. I mean, it's really pretty great to kind of keep that connection going too as you go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
all right.
One learning for me was, in general, is whatever number you think sounds high, that sounds very low to somebody else. I mean, 700K sounded super high to us, and now we're talking to folks, family offices and stuff, where they're like, well, the smallest check they'll write is 6 million because they don't want to keep track of a million, different investments or something like that. And they won't look at anything below a $10 million deal or whatever. So,
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, as you progress, and I think there's a natural progression for most syndicators, you get into larger and larger deals, but you've also got to kind of upgrade and upsize investors as well. And you get to the point to where, somebody who can write a $50,000 check is no longer exciting. It's like, stand in line, but start looking for the larger.
Hey, we love all of our investors, Brian. Like they're
I do too. But it's like, okay, 50
bigger deals, you need the bigger checks. You
need bigger checks and the investors that can write the bigger checks.
Can't have 100.
Of course, your investors that are writing the 50 check, they're still special, but they'll always be special. But I mean, to progress and to get into larger and larger deals, you got to do the same thing with your investors as well.
Yep.
So, all right. So post close, let's talk, the takeover. I know you guys did a little a value add on this. So takeover, kind of the value add process and, how that all worked out.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing on the takeover is just, I mean, ideally you have your team already done, obviously, right? Like that should have happened weeks ago, and everybody's in the loop, right? Like you should have the current PM talking to your incoming PM. Your contractor should be ready on the day you get the keys to start getting into the first vacant unit. You really want to have everybody ready to go before you close. So I would say 2 weeks before you close, start the introductions between the two parties, get everybody you can on board, figure out the time that you're going to meet for the keys, if it's going to be in person or at an office. We kind of learned both ways. On this deal, we were ready to go. It was an easy takeover. The current PM was very easily to get a hold of. On a more recent deal, it was quite the opposite. It was very much, they didn't want anything to do with us. They didn't care about the tenants, all that stuff. And it was much more of a challenge, even though we were very we insisted on making sure that we get in contact. But you just want to start that dialogue as early as you can, even if you're not closed yet, because the earlier the better. Let the experts do their thing and just help guide them and kind of point them in the right direction to make sure it gets done.
Yep. Yeah, I
And we
agree.
have a contractor working on the unit, I mean, day one. So yeah.
Now you mentioned were there any delays to closing? I think the times where we've been least prepared is when closing gets pushed and then pushed again and then pushed again and then pushed again, and it's like, okay, we're closing tomorrow.
I feel like in every deal I've been part of it, I never close on the day that it closes.
Yeah.
So if it's a day or a week, I think this one actually was pretty good, but I feel like it's always down to the last second. It's always something the day before, 2 days before, like, yeah, you don't have this. Like, what? We're in California. What do you want us to do?
Somebody told us, it might have been you, Brian, for all I know, every deal feels like it's going to completely fall apart until the last minute, and then it all comes together.
Yeah, and it's always something different in every deal too. I mean, we had one. You're speaking like Nick said. We're in California. We had a deal we closed about a year ago, and when we get to the closing table, deals in Ohio. I'm in Idaho. One of my partners is in Florida. Another partner is actually two of the other partners are in Florida, and they wanted an in-person signing. They wouldn't do notaries. They wanted us to be there in person. We're like, we got 3 days before the end of the contract, and you're telling us now.
What year was this?
Exactly. I mean, this was last year, and it was just
my gosh.
and you're telling us right now. I mean, we were able to negotiate, a notarized signing, but they said within 1 month, you have to show up in person to sign the documents. But anyway, you're right about that last minute stuff, and it was just like, oh, geez.
There's always something. I mean,
we went
listening to buy your first property, just expect a delay. Don't count it's going to close on that day. Don't buy a plane ticket the day before to go check out the property. Just wait.
My favorite was we literally flew. We did go in person to sign, showed up, and our banker was standing there in the rain in front of the front door with an umbrella, and he took us aside and he goes, "Guys, we're not closing today." Despite everything the sellers said, despite everything, in our research, we just found out one of these, 8 buildings is in a floodplain and you need flood insurance.
So, this is a different property, but
as it's raining, you're like, flood insurance, got it. Might as well. All right. So we talked the transition. Walk me through kind of your value add plan, what that looked like and how that panned out.
Yeah, I mean, our business plan was to get in there and hit 80% of the units or so that needed some help. So out of the 24, I think about 20 or maybe like 18 needed some updating. So at the end of the day, I think we got through 16 of the 18. I mean, we did a great job on our business plan. We started off with more vacancy than we wanted, but we were able to rehab more than we wanted. So we started slow, but it was very steady. And by, come 6-8 months after we bought the place, we were starting to look really good because we had brand new tenants in there paying, a lot higher on the rent. We had new updated units. So I think the biggest thing on the value add is just get ready for something to hit you hard in the mouth because nothing will go to plan. Just be flexible and have the right team to get it done. Be smart about how you can solve the problem. Lean on your PMs, lean on your contractors, lean on your boots on the ground, and just be good at problem solving. I mean, work with your partner on stuff. Just collaborate and figure out how to get it done, because there's stuff in value add that's just not going to go well, because that's part of your business plan is adding value to something that's not very valuable. So just by default, there's going to be a lot of things wrong, and it's your job to go in there and make it right. So just be flexible and just know things are going to go, the wrong way on some things, but if you're doing it right, then it'll pay off when you go to sell by a lot.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense. All right. Now, speaking of Mike, anything to add?
No, I mean, we've changed our process for the rehabs through the years. This one, we just gave everything a score of a 1, 2, or 3, where 3 was like ready to rent or base, turn if we needed to, but not CapEx rehab. 2 was needed some work, and 1 needed like everything, basically replaced. And we've kind of kept that framework, but we've gotten a lot more sophisticated about what those things mean. And now we do, that's like our quick reference, and we have a cross tab where we have every item now check marked and a price, coming from the GC, so we can calculate an exact budget and stuff like that. So we've gotten a lot more sophisticated about it, but that gets you 10% more accurate, something like that. Like,
Yeah.
just have per unit plan and budget is what I would tell anybody, but it doesn't need to be anything, crazy.
Yeah, and I like that idea where you have things itemized. I mean, if you're walking in, and this is what happens a lot. Well, what happens to a lot of newer investors is they'll go in and they'll just say, okay, flooring costs this much, cabinets are going to cost this, the counters are going to cost this, painting's going to cost this, and they forget a lot of the little stuff. They forget about fixtures. They forget about the GFCI outlets in the kitchen that they have to put in. They forget about like a lot of these little nickel and dimes, and they end up getting over in budget because of the nickels and dimes, or the hardware. We're redoing all the hardware, all the door handles and everything else. Well, in a 2-bedroom apartment, that's a couple $100 there. So yeah, that's what I see a lot as far as common mistakes. And oh, by the way, yes, I did. I made those mistakes. So
yeah. And you will. I mean, yeah, and you will. And you can't figure everything out on your first deal before you buy the property. It's impossible. You're going to learn all that through the process. And another really important note is when you do inspections, go in person and try to get into every unit. I mean, that's what we've always done, but I know that's not possible for everybody. And I use that as my Bible. I mean, like all the pictures, take every single picture, be extremely organized and use that inspection report, because you're going to need that, because you're never going to get into every unit again, probably. So, you're going to want something going into your next move out. Okay, this is what we're planning on. I have pictures. This is what I know we're going to have to redo. You're going to use that over and over, that template. And you're going to use those pictures, those years of the HVACs, because you don't want to replace something that's 2 years old. You just want to fix it, even though someone's telling you to replace it. Well, this is 2 years old. Just try to fix it first. Don't spend that $5K or whatever it is. So those are important factors on a value add deal.
A lot of lessons on that one. All right, so value add complete. Let's talk about the sales process. I mean, so I guess, was this intentionally, like, was this supposed to be a 2 to 3 year hold when you guys bought it, and if not, what triggered the whatever we're calling it, the sale
decision? Yeah. I'll take this one, Nick, because I think I was
your wheelhouse
kind of pushing this. Yeah. So, we had a 5-year pro forma that we presented to all the investors, and that was the plan, to hold the planned hold, right? And of course, like if you underwrite, that the cap rate at which you sell has a lot to do with the price you're going to get, right?
True.
Another thing when you are doing rehabs and value add is once you add all that value, you start getting some diminishing returns, then now your rents are only going up at, basically inflation rate or lower. So we had this confluence of, wow, we're done with a rehab in 14 months or something like that. That went way faster than we thought it was going to. And this was right at the beginning of this tremendous ramp up in interest rates, right? So, I said, Nick, like, I'm running the numbers. We're done with the value add. This is cash flowing like crazy. Our NOI is really high. This is fantastic. We could either hold on to this as a cash flowing deal, which was, not something we had really talked about with investors. We had very young investors that were more interested in capital gains than just getting a check for a couple $100 a month. Or we sell this way earlier than we thought before cap rates rise, because interest rates have gone up 4% in 6 months or some absurd. I can't even remember. We talked to Nick, and I talked about it. He's like, that works for me. Definitely wasn't part of our plan. We talked to, a good handful of investors and made it clear, as the GCs, ultimately it's our decision, but we don't want to do anything that's going to burn bridges. And what folks told us was, that sounds great. And do you have something else I can put into,
Yeah. What else you got? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I love that answer from investors. What else?
Yeah.
Because
we said, like, you're going to get, it was a 19% IRR, we had on this, which was, like, we can beat forecast. It's just for a much shorter period than we thought. And they said that works as long as you can roll it, into something. And we happened to be working on another deal at the same time. So a ton of our investors were just like, yeah, just take either, give me my winnings and leave the chips on the table, or I want to take, it all turns into Vegas stuff, or I want to take everything off except the winnings and roll the win. I want to play with the house money on this next one. I mean, everybody had their own, something that fit their risk profile. I think almost every investor, I think one just rolled it into our next one, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And so it was a much earlier sale than anticipated, higher returns than we anticipated. over a shorter period of time. But that was what the math said to do, and it was the right decision.
Yeah. So, I mean, to recap and tell me if I get this right, I mean, it is absolutely true that, as you're done with your value add, as you're done with your forced appreciation play, your average returns start going down. I mean, that's like the peak, which is why the 2 to 3 year holds have a lot of appeal, because you're maximizing the returns. But you guys got to that point to where you're at your peak. And so naturally, as you hold, your average returns are going down. You put your finger in the air and you're like, okay, rates are going up, which means cap rates are going to be going up, which means our prices are either going to stagnate or go down. You're like, man, right now it's not going to get better.
Yeah.
So let's just cut. And I'm not saying cut in a bad way. I mean, we've actually made similar decisions on properties where, hey, it's not going to get any better. So let's just, go ahead, exit right now.
Yeah, we had filled with all quality tenants. They're all paying, almost everybody at market rent. I mean, we had done everything that we wanted to do to the building, and having Michael as a partner that can underwrite and tell you, yeah, this is going to be the best time to sell, or we can hold it. It might be okay, but it might not. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. That's really important to have on your team. And we made the decision, and every single investor, I think, was extremely happy, with the return. So
now, I mean, it's been, how long has it been since you sold it?
Sold it in March.
March, yep.
Okay, so 6 months ish. Any regrets about selling it? Or are you guys still happy with that decision?
Oh man,
very happy.
I'm really excited about it. I mean, we got to experience selling it. I don't know if I guess we'll talk about that a little bit too, but yeah, we learned a ton in selling the property. I mean, that's just a whole nother beast that I personally, I mean, I have a lot of properties personally. I've only sold one. And you don't sell a lot, you buy a lot, right? So we have a lot of experience buying, but selling, man, it was much harder on a bigger deal. And depending on what people want as the buyer, you got to be able to produce that, so you better be organized too. So I think, Michael, if you want to kick that off a little bit, but that was a whole nother beast of a deal just by selling it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of learning when you do get into syndications, and especially when you're starting to talk to more sophisticated investors. They want to know how many deals you've gone full cycle on, right? And that, that was always like a tough question, because it's like, well, if things are going well, you're probably not going to sell, right? And like you're, if you're planning on holding for 5 years, like, are you going to do this for 5 years? And is that answer going to be zero the entire time? So there's, there's that aspect to it as well. But when the math works, there's, a lot of conversations with the brokers and with the bank as well. And the buyer was a really good fit too. This was his first syndication when he bought it, and he was looking for more of a turnkey property. So it really was a win-win-win,
Yeah. Makes sense. So let's talk about some of the differences between selling and buying, how the broker thing worked out, how you guys kind of decided. I mean, were there multiple offers? Just walk us through all of that.
Yeah. So and there wasn't a lot out there, like we had read all the books, listened to the podcasts, not a lot of people talk about selling. So I was excited to talk about it today. I knew that we would probably have a broker. We shopped around a lot, and, you want to find a broker where this deal is like in their sort of wheelhouse of size. It's going to be a relatively big deal for them, but not the biggest and not the smallest, that they've done. And we eventually landed on one that we had been really impressed by the OMs that they sent us when they were selling properties. I particularly loved the amount of data they put into the OM that let us fully underwrite properties just based on the OM, which is rare, and really good personality match. And then I think the clincher for us was, we reached out to them at like 9 p.m. and they immediately called us back. Both of them, the two principals, made the case for why they were the right ones. And we found out later this was a quite small deal for them, but they treated us very well, like any other client.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, just a couple other anecdotes about that. We thought, and a couple of investors had expressed some interest in buying, but sort of kicking the tires. We had this wide range of people, and we were like, their rate was a little higher, right? They wanted 3%. And I immediately wrote to Brian and I said, hey, what are you guys paying? And he said 1.2%, 1.8% on the last deal. We're like, this is pretty high, but it's a much smaller deal. We were told to expect a higher price. When you sell a personal property, you pay 6%, right?
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, our only thing is if we sell this property and they're just, an intermediary, like if we sell it to one of our own investors or we find the buyer, we want to only pay them, 1.5%, I think was what it was. And they reluctantly agreed to that. And they said, send us a list of your potential buyers. And they thought that was going to be 10. We sent them 3 pages of names, and they were like, wow, okay. And then they came right back with, we think we have a buyer for you. It's somebody in our list of clients that's been looking for exactly this type of price. And they sold it to their guy at a higher price than we ever wanted. And
we did have multiple offers though. I mean, I think we had 5 or 6 offers on it, all like kind of within what we were thinking, almost there. And then we pulled the trigger on the last one.
Yeah. What made the difference between the offer that you selected and the offers that you didn't?
I would say a combination of them, we wanted a good steward for our tenants. Like we had put all this work into this too. Like it wasn't just whoever writes the biggest check, essentially it was part of it for me, at least. I think for our team that's important. We wanted somebody who was going to be communicative, and
ideally local too.
Ideally local. Yep. The brokers said, I'm trying not to reveal too much, name names and stuff, but they had been working with this person for a while who was looking for that like Goldilocks property for their first syndication. And the other part of the reason we needed somebody who was communicative and friendly and everything is there was this then part of the reason we got a really good price is we negotiated with our bank to make the loan assumable, even though we hadn't gone in with it being an assumable loan. Right.
Okay.
So we had this like 3.25% loan or 3.5% loan. God, that sounds crazy. And the loan this person was going to get was going to be about 6.5%, right? Because interest rates had just shot up.
I'd even take a good 6.5% rate right now. I mean,
for sure. Yeah.
Right. So
8.5.
Yeah. So it turned into this like 3 or 4 way negotiation between us, the buyer, the bank, assuming our part of the loan, which was now pretty small, would have been like a, 40% LTV or whatever, and they needed to add a loan on top of that and have a blended rate and stuff like that. And everybody needed to be like negotiating with a smile, communicative, working together.
Yeah.
So it all worked out. I think in the end we had two offers that were the same price, and then we went.
And just make sure you're organized. I mean, keep all the invoices for your CapEx stuff. Keep all documentations, because the next buyer is going to want all that. And if you can't produce it, there's going to be a big red flag getting thrown up right away, and you're not going to get what you want. I mean, you got to be able to prove what you've done. You got to be clear. You got to be kind of on the ball with that. So from day one, keep a folder. Document everything, just keep track of everything. And we've done a really good job making sure that we're ready now when we sell another property, that it's not going to be a headache.
And we talked about that from the buyer perspective about 25 minutes ago. So I mean, it is the same. If you come to the table with like 3 documents, they're going to be like, what are these guys doing? But good point on that one. You make sure you have all the documents that you would ask for as a buyer.
Especially if you've owned it for 16 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Not 30 years.
and another thing for us too that we see mixed stuff amongst sponsors and our brokers. We're like, oh, thank God you guys did this. But make sure, this is like nerdy accountant speak for a second, but make sure you capitalize expenses that need to be capitalized, and you expense and put it into operational expenses, things that are operational expenses. Every dollar, if you don't do that, because we see people, we're looking at one right now where they put all their CapEx into operations, I guess trying to save money on taxes so they could write off the whole thing, which is also, a question. But a lot of folks do that to try and save money on taxes, and it makes the property look like it's not profitable. If you do that, every dollar you spend on CapEx is $20 off your sale price, So like, especially on your, in the 12 months before you sell, make sure you're capitalizing capital expenses and they're not coming out of your NOI, because your NOI is going to determine your sale price. So like a lot of folks don't do that, and I think it hurts.
Pro tip there. And I mean, make sure you have a good accountant who understands the difference.
Yes.
All right, we are almost out of time, so we're going to hit the best part of the episode button. So I'm going to ask you both same question. Let's see, Nick, you started the episode, so Mike, I'm going to give you first call at this one. Sure. But looking back, what was the biggest lesson learned from the whole experience from contract to close to actually coming full cycle?
Yeah, I mean, if there was one lesson, it's probably think a little bigger than you probably are right now, because I took a ton of time to do, research and stuff like that. I probably do a couple of years maybe of prep, but don't do 20 years like I did. And then when it comes to the size of the deal, you can do like, I've never subscribed to the 10x mentality of, okay, whatever you're thinking, 10x it, but probably 2x it, probably
Yeah.
3x it, because I thought 700,000 sounded like a ton of money, and that was super easy. And we tripled that on the next one, and now we're trying to double that yet again. So we're doing a raise that's 8 times larger than that within a few years.
Mhm.
If you have confidence in your underwriting and you're know that it's a good deal, then lots of those other things will fall in place. You'll find the money, you'll find the right folks to work on it. So
Absolutely. And I'll throw one caveat on there. He did say 700 was easy, but remember, they talked about all the prep work they had done prior to. That's what made it easy. And so I have a lot of people who are trying to raise money now, and they're like, oh my gosh, 200,000 is great, but do the prep work,
yes,
build your foundation and
make it easy for yourself. Yeah. By doing the hard work.
Yeah. All right, Nick, same question for you. What was the biggest lesson learned from taking this deal full cycle?
I think for me, it was not everything has to be perfect. Okay. Yeah. So, you go in thinking, okay, I'm going to make sure I do this, this, and that. And it changes, day one. So just be flexible on everything that you're kind of coming across, and just know, if you do it right, if you're putting your mind to it, if you're doing it by the right way by the books, then it's going to turn out okay. And I think just start building that network, because Michael and I were talking a little bit before this call, and it's like, whatever you're doing right now, just start talking to people, just start learning people in your market, talking to people in your market, talk to people around you, family, friends, coworkers, whatever it may be, because you never know when you're going to need to call on someone for capital raise, for a reference, for a contractor you might need, or someone that's done work in your market. So those are things that we've kind of learned along the way that have, taken us from 24 units to over, almost 150 units. So, those things, put them all together and you form a powerhouse, so.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, thanks for coming on the show today, and very much appreciate your guys' time, and great idea to talk about full cycle deal, something I hadn't really thought about yet. And I think it's an awesome idea, and we hope to get a lot more people doing the same thing. But one last question for each of you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, well, we partnered up officially. Actually, on that deal, we had our own LLCs and everything, and we're kind of dating, and then we recently got married. So now, and there's a third partner not on because he wasn't on this deal yet, but our partner Mark. So we're Matanza Capital Partners. You can find us at matanzacapital.com. I'm going to do something crazy and say my phone number, because one thing I learned from Nick is pick up the friggin' phone. Don't just email and ask if you can schedule a Zoom call or whatever. So if anybody's interested, just call me 619-813-9209, or shoot me a text. That might be even better. And because we don't need a half-hour meeting scheduled by Zoom just to get to know each other. Just let's just have a quick chat.
I love it. And I have actually cold called people from leaving their numbers off of podcasts too. So, and it's never turned out bad. Nobody threw anything at me. I didn't die.
Well, that network.
Yeah. Usually it ends up with lunch or something like that. So, well, awesome. Well, hey, we'll put the link to the website, Matanza Capital, in the show notes. And, we'll drop your phone number in there as well. So always nice to talk to somebody else with a 619 area code. Love my time in San Diego, and, we'll hopefully we talk soon, man. Hopefully see you guys soon.
Thanks, Brian.
All right.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community, the Tribe of Titans, yet, you are missing out. So get yourself 30 days free by clicking the link below in the description, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.